Good afternoon and welcome to BizTech's Asian Midday Market Watch, powered by Austral Asset Management. Now, Kelvin Wong, founder of the Lighthouse Chronicle, is our guest today. Kelvin, good afternoon.
Hey, hi, good afternoon to you, Brian. Good to be back, and I wish you a happy, prosperous Lunar Chinese New Year.
Yes, and I hope that the year of the rabbit will be a very good year for you too.
Thank you.
Now, Kelvin, before we get your insights, we're going to take a look and see how markets have performed in the first half of the day. Many markets are opened for the first time after being shut for 2 days. We start with, however, cryptocurrencies. Bitcoin is already at 22,635. It's down 1.92%. Ethereum is at 1,547. It's down 5.58%. Now, looking across to equity markets, we've got the SGX, which is up sharply. It's up 1.78% after opening today. We then have the KLCI, which is down 0.28%. Shanghai is closed today. The ASX All Ordinaries is down 0.16%. The Nikkei is up 0.42%. The Hang Seng is closed today. And rounding up the numbers, we've got the Kospi, which is up 1.32%. Kelvin, what's your view on market performance in the first half of the day?
I would say that definitely we're talking about markets for some of the Asia market has been closed for the last 2 days. Yes, definitely we see a spurt up in momentum optimism, especially the STI is actually up more than 1%. But from the way I look at it over here is I do not see it. The sustainability of this rally may be questionable. So later I'll touch on why. Because if you look at the one of the major stock indices, the US Nasdaq 100, is actually facing a bit of roadblock at this moment in time, especially the numbers, the earning numbers up from one of the bellwether stock, which is Microsoft. Very interesting price action that later I'll share with the audience thereafter.
Okay, I think first I want to touch on numbers out this morning out of Australia, which is inflation in Australia rose to a new 32-year high of 7.8% in the final quarter of the fiscal year 2022. Now, that's so long ago. I was in university at that time in Australia when that last figure happened, that last high. Kelvin, walk us through some of the numbers and the reasons behind it.
Yeah, so definitely what we could see, most importantly, is the numbers of the Australia. This is the annual of Australia year-on-year growth rate, which is up for Q4 last year at 7.84%. So it's above expectation, and most importantly, it's the highest rate that was seen so far in Q1 1990. So that's close to about 20 year plus high. So what's most importantly over here is that how does it impact the financial markets? So what we could see in the FX markets, the Australian dollar actually reacted very positively right now. So this is actually live data. So across the major currency, they're actually gaining the strongest across the board. So up by 0.8%. What's important, technically speaking, over here is that there are some key levels that for traders in the FX market to pay attention to on this Aussie dollar pair. So what we could see over here is that since the low of 13th of October 2022, which is at 61.67, it has been trading in a medium-term uptrend, and momentum still remains strong, especially as indicated by this daily RSI indicator, hasn't yet to actually hit its extreme overbought zone. So the resistance level we should be paying close attention to right now is at 72.65, 72.40. Also confluence to this major descending channel that has kept previous rally since its peak of 24th of February last year. So for short-term traders, right, in order to maintain the current, we call it intraday momentum right now, there's these two key supports, we call it levels to actually watch, is at 70.50 and 69, 70.50 and close to the 70 figure level in order for the Australian dollar to maintain this current intraday upside momentum.
Now, Kelvin, I want to get your insights just really quickly on Microsoft.
Yes.
After the price performance of its shares, because obviously the reaction for these shares to its earnings report was actually twofold.
Yes, precisely. So those readers who actually followed my Lighthouse Chronicle newsletter, I've been talking about this week about this Janus effect. So it's a two-phase opposite effect, precisely very deceptive. We call it effect, which actually playing out in the markets right now. So what we could see over here is that initially, Microsoft Apple, Microsoft, Google, Facebook, then you have Twitter and other kind of major tech companies have started to actually announce layoffs, which signified that, hey, there's business not doing very good for this tech company. But on the other hand, the more they lay off, it seems to be that markets actually like this layoff, because if you look at what happened last Friday, the US stock market, the stock index actually rallied close to about 2%, especially the Nasdaq 100. So everybody talking about, hey, this kind of layoff or business sentiment is actually forcing the Fed to actually pivot. But on the other hand, we've got to be careful over here is that if revenue start to dip very, very significantly for these companies, it means that there will be an earnings recession, i.e. there will be what I call more earnings downgrade by the analysts, which has been very rosy in the last quarter. So this is what has been playing out in Microsoft today, which is right after the close of the US session. So what I want to highlight over here is that before we go to the price action of Microsoft, let's take a quick look at the numbers first. So what you can see over here, this from CNBC website. So this is actually the breakdown of the various product line in Microsoft, right? The top two are the most significant drivers, which is the Azure with the cloud service and other cloud services as well. So what we could see over here is that yesterday's numbers was FY 2023 Q2. So what we could see over here is that, yeah, there's still positive growth across the board, but what you see that this positive growth, right, year-on-year growth, has started to slow down significantly in the last 6 to 7 quarters. And in fact, last quarter growth was the lowest in terms of the Azure cloud services, which is that only grew at 31% year-on-year versus in FY 2021 Q3, which is 50%, and the growth has reduced significantly. And what we could see is that other cloud services has dipped by 13% as well, which is what we could see over here is that potentially, right, the crown jewel business of Microsoft is actually facing potential headwinds going forward into the next quarter. And that could actually resonate well, even though this quarter earnings managed to beat estimate by a fair bit. But what's concerned over here is the earnings guidance for the next quarter, where the senior management actually guided much lower than expectation. So they're expecting around 50.5 billion to 51.5 billion, lower than the analyst estimate of 52.43 billion. So overall, we could see this price action, a very interesting price action of Microsoft is this is actually the 15-minute chart. So this is actually the close of the regular New York session. So right after the earnings came out, the first 5 minutes, so it popped up by 5%. Then thereafter, the market going to digest the very lackluster earnings growth that I shared with you in the earlier segment, the previous breakdown of that product line segment of Microsoft. And most importantly, after that earnings guidance, which is lackluster, you see Microsoft totally wipe up this early pop-up, and from the top, actually declined by close to negative 6%. So overall, net, right, you see the after hours trading, after hours session, it actually ended with close to, in fact, yeah, right at a negative 1% down. So that actually translates to a pretty much negative, we call it performance that we see right now in the Asian session on the US stock indices. The Nasdaq 100 E-mini futures is down close to 0.8%. And very quickly, lastly, the technical chart of the Nasdaq 100, this is the futures, is now coming very close to the 200-day moving average, and also the range top of this range configuration that's in place since October last year, which is at 12,120, 12,270. So potentially, right, what we could see this negative feedback loop or the Janus effect that's being taken place in the US market right now. We could see the Nasdaq 100 actually disappoint the optimism that was actually being hopeful for the Fed pivot to actually come down much lower this week. What I could see technically, potentially, it could actually see a slide down to retest 11,380 at least.
Now, Kelvin, then before you leave, what are some key events for the rest of the week we should be watching out for that could move markets?
Yeah, definitely. So US session is still ongoing, it's still kicking, definitely. So tomorrow will be another bellwether stock, which is Tesla, which is very important. Why? Because even though they are up by 43% since the start of the year, overall, they still have pretty much to catch up, because from the all-time high in around early part of this year, they're still, early part of last year, they're still down close to 70%. So the earnings number will be out on Wednesday when the US market closes. So do pay a close attention to that. And one that's pretty much related to that so-called Fed pivot will be Friday, where the US will actually report a inflationary data, which called the PCE price index.
Now, Kelvin, as always, thank you very much for your insights. Thanks for coming on the show.
My pleasure, Brian.
Now, we've been speaking to Kelvin Wong, founder of the Lighthouse Chronicle, on BizTech's Asian Midday Market Watch, powered by Austral Asset Management. I'm Brian Fernandez. This video and podcast will be on our website, www.biztech.asia, as well as our social media platforms. It'll also be on our syndication partners, TV stations, radio stations, and websites. Thanks a lot for tuning in.